My name is Afe Adogame. On behalf of my co-conveners, Professor Richard Young and Professor Raimundo Barreto, and the entire World Christianity Conference Secretariat, we offer you a warm welcome in this cold winter to our third annual international conference, this time virtually. You will recall that exactly 1 year ago, we had to cancel our in-person third international conference a few days before the arrival of participants in Princeton. This was totally due to the unprecedented news of COVID-19 outbreak and initial spread at that time of the year. The cancellation was rather abrupt. It was indeed a painful decision at the time, as some international participants already arrived in Princeton. Others had to cancel flights and hotel bookings. There were also financial losses, flight no-shows, and no refunds, loss of hotel reservation deposits. We also had to attend to several emergencies and unforeseen developments on our own part. In short, the aftermath was very frustrating and disappointing to many, and the organizers as well. This is more so as much time, energy, and resources had been committed to planning the conference that never was. However, in retrospect, PTS authorities took the right, appropriate decision to avoid COVID-19 spread on our campus, as health and safety of participants and the PTS community was paramount at that time and even now. Since March 2020, even as far back as December 2019, the world has experienced profound disruptions and unprecedented dislocations. The last several months were exceptionally challenging. The global COVID-19 pandemic has forced us to adjust or change our lives to a new normal, ways we could never have imagined. This is manifest in our families, local communities, and in our own lives in myriad ways. The pandemic crisis has had deleterious effects on our World Christianity Conference too. Hence, we are holding a virtual instead of an in-person conference this year. Our hearts and prayers are with those who lost family members, loved ones, and those who are in critical health condition at this time. The pandemic also led to the cancellation of the third conference in March 2020 and its subsequent change to a virtual conference in March 3rd to 6th, 2021. We are so delighted that you are all attending this virtual conference in spite of the current uncertainties, misery, and challenges. Your participation gives us a lot of hope and optimism in the fact that where there is a will, there is a way. As of today, we have a total of 317 registered for this conference, out of which 147 are presenting papers. We are indeed very excited about this. This is a significant increase from the last two conferences. Our first conference our first conference in 2018 recorded 130 attendees, including 120 presenters from 25 countries. Our conference in March 2019, from the 15th to the 18th, recorded more than 200 participants from 36 countries. And with the slides, you can see the upward increase in terms of the demography. You can also see, for instance, the regions and the countries from which participants derive. We are so excited that this year's conference is also entertaining, participants from several countries. And I'm very sure that by the time we have the full record, this would actually be more than the 36 countries we had last year. And if you look at this map, you could see participation is coming from the densely shaded parts of the world, in this case, particularly the US and Canada, but also we have a very robust representation from Europe, also from Asia, as well as Africa. And we're also very proud that we are beginning to have participation from the Pacific and from New Zealand and Australia. So this for us is a good sign of better things to come. Next slide, please. So you can see again the attendance by regions of the world. And if we go by what we popularly use in World Christianity, the binaries of Global South and Global North, you can see the ratio there. And we are very delighted that, every year things are looking up. And again, that is a good sign for us. Last slide. So having said that, I think it's important to think about not just now, but also the future. We are very excited about this year's, actually the theme for 2020 theme, which is currents, perspectives, and methodologies for the study of world Christianity and its interactions with other religions. Sometimes we often assume that Christianity operates, grows, and develops in a historical, social, cultural, political, religious silos or contexts. This is hardly the case. Christianity then and now, as we know it, has shaped all geographical, religious, and cultural contexts it has found itself. But these various contexts, cultures, and religious traditions have also impacted on Christianity in manifold ways. An exploration of this intercourse is important for our global age. The last few decades mark a significant watershed in the study of world Christianity as an emerging field, its development into an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary endeavor in particular. Reflections on the complexness of Christianity, both as a world religion and as a pluricultural global phenomenon, is rather compelling. While research on Christianity's cross-cultural, transnational, and diasporic manifestations has begun, interrogation of theory and methodology grounded in case study research should be an ongoing process as well. As a field of study, World Christianity continues to pursue a threefold conversation across borders of culture, borders of confession, and across borders with other religious traditions, such as indigenous religions, Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism. The study of world Christianity seeks to understand how Christian communities embody historical and cultural experiences locally and globally, and thus foster the study and practice of both local and translocal ways of knowing and doing. Thus, world Christianity hardly exists in historical and sociocultural vacuum. It encounters, affects, and are in turn impacted by local indigenous worldviews, religions, and cultures. This mutuality of influences need further contextual understanding and analysis. The conference therefore seeks first to explore and reflect on the diversity of local indigenous expressions and experiences of Christianity, their encounter with other religious traditions, and the variety of ways these interact with one another critically and constructively across time and space. Second, the conference would focus on ethnographic practices and new methodological directions weaved with case studies in grasping negotiations of Christian identities, ideologies, and practices, frameworks and contexts within which world Christianity takes place and across border with other religious traditions. In this year's conference, we are very fortunate to have two keynote speakers, Professor Andrew Walls and Professor Shobhana Shankar, in our virtual midst. They will be properly introduced later, but let me, on behalf of my colleagues, express our profound gratitude for honoring our invitation, particularly during these difficult times. We are indeed looking forward to sharing from your wealth of experiences. This year, we have also convened two special panels to honor two pioneering figures in the interdisciplinary field of world Christianity, Professor Andrew Walls and Professor Ogbukalu of blessed memory. Both giant figures who have contributed immensely to the making and shaping of world Christianity. We are deeply honored that we can give honor to whom honor is due. Thirdly, we are very proud to continue to feature a graduate special panel. This initiative is very dear to us as part of our mentoring strategy. This time around, we will again have several graduate students sharing their current PhD research projects with us and receiving constructive feedback. I will encourage all participants to attend, support, and encourage these inspiring early career scholars during that session. We also have a movie screening session, and we are indebted to Jim Alt for sharing his new documentary film to be accompanied with discussion. Please take advantage of this relaxing atmosphere during the conference. Besides these sessions I have mentioned, the conference schedule also includes 10 paper sessions divided into 4 parallel WebEx room streams, except for one session that is 5, and spreads across 4 days within 2 major time zones. That is from 10 a.m. to 1:15 p.m. and from 7:45 p.m. to 9:15 p.m. Eastern Time. and that will be different depending on where you are. And you can see this on page 2 of your virtual program. This was carefully done to accommodate almost all geographical zones from which participants are drawn. More information about this will be shared momentarily. Let me conclude. Let me now turn to give special appreciations to all those who have made this virtual conference possible and successful. President Craig Barnes and the entire PTS management have been very supportive in several respects. Since the inauguration of the World Christianity Conference in 2018, we have received financial support through which we have partly provided travel subsidies to selected participants from the Global South. I must remark specially that President Barnes, Professor Jack Lapsley, the academic dean, and other members of the executive were very understanding and supportive last year after the administration was constrained to cancel our conference, as I mentioned earlier. They were very magnanimous in voting out some funds with which we attempted to cushion the financial loss that many participants were faced with. Besides refunding conference registration fees, we were able to provide symbolic palliative sums to a limited number of prospective participants. Professor Barnes, please convey our deep gratitude to the management for the generous support we have received and that we will continue to receive from you. Second, we would like to express gratitude to the Events and Hospitality Office that is headed by Emmy Ellen. Also, we want to express thanks to Maya, who both have supported us tremendously in planning this conference. Our gratitude also to the IT and Communication Office. I cannot mention all, but permit me to mention Bill Brown, James Gilchrist, Lindsay Trozo, Nicole Pride, and all other staff members. We are deeply grateful. Let me also use this opportunity to show appreciation to the Business Office for handling and disbursing funds as at when due. Thank you so much for all you do to support us. I will not forget to appreciate the Academic Office, the Housing Department, and the Security Department as well. They've all contributed in their own ways to supporting us. It's very important at this point to show our deep gratitude to the Conference Secretariat. The Conference Secretariat comprises about 9 or 10 graduate students who have been working, round the clock to ensure that this conference is successful. So I would like to show on behalf of the conveners our gratitude, but let me particularly mention 3 research assistants in particular. Byung Ho Choi, Ruth Amwe, Son Afia Kim. These 3 people did the heavy lifting, and we are immensely grateful for working around the clock to ensure that this conference is successful. So thank you on behalf of the conveners. Finally, let me mention the PTS faculty and students who have supported us, but also the student volunteers. We have over 20 students who have volunteered to support us in different ways, and you will be seeing them as hosts in the different WebEx rooms as we continue. Finally, our deep gratitude to the conference participants. We have veterans among you who have attended the 3 conferences, but we also have first-time attendees We have those who have volunteered as chairs and moderators. Without you, this conference would not be possible. So thank you so very much. It leaves me now to wish all participants, presenters, to fasten their seatbelts, sit back, relax, enjoy, and make the best out of this conference as we are prepared to engage in intellectual conversation and exchange. It is also a forum to catch up, renew old networks, and build new ones, albeit virtually. It's obvious that now and the future, we cannot return to a normal way of doing things. Rather, what we will have is a new normal. We are already thinking about the World Christianity Conference next year, 2022. As we informed you at the 2019 conference, we are planning alternate conferences between Princeton and the Global South. This is still part of our plan. However, because this is a virtual conference, we would plan to hold an in-person conference here next year, and then move to have the 2023 conference in the Global South. Ghana is already bidding for it. Nonetheless, we are hoping and indeed looking forward to an in-person or a hybrid conference in 2022. As conveners and conference secretariat, we ask for patience from our audience and participants in case of any technological glitches. We have done our very best, and we hope that the internet and WebEx will cooperate. But there's, of course, always an element of uncertainty. I would like to invite all of you to participate in our closing session on Saturday, when, among other things, we'll be discussing our plans and welcoming your suggestions for the forthcoming conferences. We have also prepared an evaluation form for you to complete. We would like to know your suggestions on how we improve and serve you better. So, colleagues, let me now invite President Barnes to offer very warm words of welcome and to officially declare the PTS World Christianity Conference 2021 open. President Barnes.
Thank you. On behalf of Princeton Theological Seminary, it is my privilege to welcome you to this year's World Christianity Conference. As Professor Adogami just said, it was about this time last year that we were expecting to welcome you to our campus to host this conference. The pandemic had begun, though, to make its deadly spread through the world, including Princeton. And I believe this conference was the first event we had to cancel with great regret. That was followed by a year of disruption for all of us around the world and deep grief over the 2.5 million people who have died from this horrible virus around the world. We pray for an end to this long ordeal, and we certainly hope to host you back on our campus next year. I want to express the seminary's deep appreciation and admiration for the conveners of this conference, our 3 professors of world Christianity, Dr. Afe Adogame, Dr. Richard Young, and Dr. Raimundo Barreto. And I too want to express appreciation for our hardworking graduate students who have served as the secretariat for this event and kept the wheels turning on the preparation and delivery of a complex virtual conference. They're very gifted, hardworking, and we're grateful. Our focus on this year's conference is on theory, methodology, and case studies for understanding world Christianity's interactions with other religions. This topic has long been dear to my heart. My PhD dissertation spent considerable time on the influence of Mahatma Gandhi on early 20th century Protestant missionaries like John R. Mott, a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, who ended his career as the first president of the World Council of Churches in 1948. Mott spent years in meetings and in correspondence with Gandhi, seeking help with a fundamental missionary dilemma. Mott believed that as a leader of several missionary movements, he was called to seek the evangelization of the world. But he knew the reforms in India, which certainly looked closer to the reign of God than colonization, could only be accomplished by a Hindu. And he relentlessly asked Gandhi to help him resolve this dilemma. Mott and the World Council of Churches eventually learned how to broaden their understanding of evangelism. But the questions remain of how to be faithful to the convictions of one's own religion while embracing the integrity of other faiths, and how to work together for a world that does indeed come closer to the reign of God. And these are some of the questions you will be approaching at this very important conference. Now it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Thomas Hastings, the director of the Overseas Ministry Study Center. We are honored that this highly esteemed center has now embedded at Princeton Theological Seminary. And next year, we'll be delighted to show you the OMSC house, which is at the heart of our campus in every sense of that word. And now, Dr. Hastings.
Thank you, President Barnes and Professor Adogame, for your kind words of introduction and warm welcome. Since beginning this journey that has led to OMSC now being embedded as a research center at the seminary, President Barnes, the executive, all levels of administration, faculty, and staff have been very supportive, generous, and welcoming to us, and we are truly grateful. In making this move from Princeton from New Haven, I want to acknowledge the legacy and contributions of OMSC's founders and directors in our first two iterations, beginning with the Houses of Fellowship in Ventnor by the Sea, New Jersey, from 1922 to 1987, and in New Haven, Connecticut, from 1987 to June 2020, last year. Beginning with a generous endowment gift from American Baptists Ida and Marguerite Doan, the daughters of Frances Mary Treat Doan and William Howard Doan, well-known hymn writer and inventor of industrial wood shaping machines. I'll tell you what that is later. OMSC has been led by the Doan sisters, Alice M. Bell, Marjorie D. Roberts, and beginning in 1973, a succession of academically trained directors, namely R. Pierce Beaver, Gerald H. Anderson, Jonathan Bonk, Nelson Jennings, Darrell Whiteman, and since 2016, I have had the privilege of being the executive director. But none of our work over the past 99 years could have been accomplished without the marvelous support staffs in Ventnor and in New Haven. And I want to offer a personal thank you and a blessing to one and to all. On this occasion of the Third World Christianity Conference at PTS, I want to take this opportunity to thank the seminary for your decision, as President Barnes just mentioned, to place us in the center of the campus in the newly renovated OMSC house, just across from the library, next to the Alexander Hall, where I and some of you defended your dissertations. This historic house will serve a dual purpose as OMSC's official headquarters and as the director's residence. I also want to thank Herman Martinez, the seminary's facility workers, and the many subcontractors for the careful work they have done in transforming this historic home into a beautiful and welcoming space. Carol and I moved in on January 28th, and though we are still unpacking boxes and getting artwork up on the walls, we are thrilled to be here and looking forward to opening our doors to the seminary community and to our first cohort of OMSC at PTS Global Partners. I want to offer a special word of thanks and appreciation to Professors Richard Young, Afe Adogame, and Raimundo Barreto. We are truly grateful for your enthusiastic support and warm welcome, and we look forward to exploring ways for OMSC and the seminary's academic program in world Christianity to mutually support and enhance each other's work into the future. Many thanks to you three and the conference secretariat for convening this third international conference in the midst of the pandemic. Looking forward to the not so distant future, today I am also thrilled to introduce Dr. Easton Law, who will join the OMSC at PTS staff from July 1st as our Assistant Director for Academic Programs. Easton recently defended his PhD dissertation at Georgetown University under the directorship of Professor Peter Phan, who usually attends this conference but couldn't do so this year because of other obligations. Since last July, Easton has been working as our part-time book review editor for the International Bulletin of Mission Research. We look forward to welcoming Easton and his family into the seminary community, and we know that he will make many wonderful contributions to our work at PTS. Many of you who are attending this conference may already be familiar with OMSC's residential program, our academic journal, the International Bulletin of Mission Research, IBMR, and our Artist in Residence program. However, due to the pandemic-related restrictions, we could not welcome our first group of global partners from Brazil, China, India, Myanmar, Nigeria, South Africa, and South Korea to campus. So we launched our first ever online study program. With the kind assistance of the seminary's Office of Digital Learning and Kevin Vollrath, a PhD candidate in religion and society and our online study program manager, that program has proven to be a great success. To date, we have averaged 22 participants from all over the world for each of our 17 seminars, webinars, and Meet the Author events to date. Please tell your friends and colleagues that OMSC waives registration fees for all of our online events for doctoral students working in mission studies, world Christianity, intercultural theology, and cognate disciplines, as well as for the entire PTS community. Finally, in closing, I want to take this opportunity to briefly introduce 4 new program initiatives that Easton and I are planning to launch in the upcoming 2021-2022 academic year. I think these will be of interest to you and your colleagues. Firstly, we will be piloting an online curriculum leading to a certificate in lived theology and world Christianity. Secondly, we will be launching RFPs, requests for proposals, for 4 research grants of $5,000 each to support individual or collaborative research in writing in mission studies, world Christianity, intercultural theology, and cognate disciplines. Thirdly, and hopefully with the collaboration and support of the World Christianity faculty and this conference, we hope to inaugurate a named annual lectureship. The name and the venue will be announced later. And finally, at the request of many scholars, we will begin publishing in the IBMR English translations of articles written by majority world scholars working in other languages. More information will be available on our website before the summer. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity to give greetings to you on behalf of OMSC at PTS, and every blessing to all of the participants as you begin this exciting conference.
So thank you very much indeed, Professor Burns, first and foremost for your welcome and for declaring this conference officially open. At the same time, for your very kind words and support. Second, Dr. Hastings, we are also very delighted that you are here. Thanks for all the information you have shared. And we look forward to very robust engagement during your time here at PTS and in our interactions with OMSC. Let me invite at this point the conference secretariat to pass on some in-house information and also to help us decomplexify some of the information you may have received by email. So it's my delight to invite Byung-Ho Choi to please take the podium.
Greetings, everyone. My name is Byung-Ho Choi, and I'm a second-year PhD student here at Princeton Theological Seminary in World Christianity. As I have communicated with many of you through email, I'm also serving as one of the secretariats for the World Christianity Conference. And I would like to convey my warmest greetings to all of you to our third World Christianity virtual conference. At this time, I would like to give you a brief orientation about this year's virtual conference. So let me please share my screen, and I will convey the important points for this conference. We hope that all of you received our email regarding the latest version of the academic program. For those of you that might have not received it, we have also prepared an online version of the conference academic program. You will see in the chat shortly the link to the online conference academic program. In the second page of the academic program, and here on the screen, as you can see on the right, you will also be able to see the time zone chart. Preparing for this year's World Christianity Conference required another layer of detailed preparation, as we had to think of the various time zones all of you are located in. The standard for this year's conference time will be US Eastern Time, which is highlighted in yellow on the very top. We apologize if you are unable to locate your current city on the very left column, but if you would look in the bottom, there is a time zone converter link that you can freely use. One aspect of the program that we are very proud of and which required a lot of work is that we have provided links to the individual paper panels. Using your computer, you can just click that link. Here on the screen, you can see a red arrow, and that link will directly lead you to the panel that you would like to participate or present in. And as much as we have made the conference convenient for our registrants, we want to emphasize that you please do not share the academic program or the links with anyone outside of the conference. In a way, this academic program will be the key to the World Christianity Conference, and we would like for our only registrants to hold the key throughout the conference. Currently, the World Christianity Conference is not utilizing any social media platform at the moment, but we would like to welcome you as you utilize your own social media platforms, such as Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. And we would appreciate it if you could use the following hashtag, hashtag PTSWC21, so that the conference will get the much deserved attention in various social media platforms. in the link in the chat, I've also written down so that you can just copy it into your computer or your mobile phones. It has also come to our attention that some of our participants may not know that they are also chairing and moderating a session. Many of our presenters have clicked yes when we asked if you would consider chairing or moderating a paper panel or presentation. Hence, we have freely assigned you to various panels to moderate and chair. So we kindly ask that you please check the program in detail if your names are in any of the moderating or chairing sessions as well. An important aspect that I would also like to share in regards is reaching out to us throughout the duration of the conference. And this requires us to open a door for you to communicate with us. If you have any inquiries regarding logging into WebEx, downloading WebEx, general questions about the WebEx platform, as I'm sure many of you are new to, please use the email address here on the screen, helpdesk at media.help@ptsem.edu, to reach out to the help desk to contact us. I want to emphasize the aspect that this email address should be only used for purposes of regarding in logging into WebEx, downloading WebEx, or just general questions about the WebEx platform. I've also provided this email address in our chat box, so please feel free to copy that onto your computer or your mobile phones as well. Now, if you have any questions regarding the World Christianity Conference in general, such as regards to the academic program, or if you have any issues or questions about your presentations or participating in one of the paper sessions, you should feel free to reach out to the conference secretariats and volunteers through the email address provided here in the screen at worldchristianityconference@ptsem.edu. Again, I would like to emphasize that this email address should be used to inquire about the conference and the academic program. Currently, we are living in a state of a new norm where a lot of classes and a lot of meetings are taking place through online platforms such as WebEx or Zoom. And one of the things that I'm sure all of you have experienced is just basic etiquettes of how to navigate on online conferences or meetings. One important aspect that we would like to emphasize is that you please remain muted when there are other presenters presenting. Also, when other people are asking questions in our WebEx meetings platform. I'm sure that all of you are used to this, but we still wanted to emphasize this aspect to you all. For those of you that have inquired about your own presentations and paper panels, do not fear. Every room, every WebEx meeting room is assigned a volunteer who will be serving as hosts in your WebEx rooms. So any questions that you might have regards to how can I share my PowerPoint screen, or how can I show a video clip, or etc. within the WebEx room, you can freely ask the volunteers that will be present in each of the WebEx rooms. We have asked students here at Princeton Theological Seminary and other institutions to help out during the duration of the conference, and they have so willingly participated and also been educated in how to better help you and serve you throughout this conference. So if you have any questions, especially to our presenters, please feel free to attend about 15 minutes before your own presentation starts and ask questions to our volunteers. Throughout the conference, as Dr. Adogame mentioned, there will be little glitches. There will be some issues that is out of our own boundaries. We ask for your understanding. At the same time, if you have any questions or if you have any problems please feel free to reach out to the 2 emails that I provided you in the chat box. We hope that you, throughout the conference, starting from today until Saturday, that you enjoy your time, network with various people, and also learn through various presentations and paper panels. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much, Byung, for those very key, important information. And we are gradually coming to the end of this segment. But I would like to invite my colleagues to either show a wave of the hand or to say 1 or 2 words of welcome. Could I invite Dr. Young, please?
Greetings, everyone. I think there are around 100 people online right now participating in the orientation. So far, so good. The internet gods seem to be smiling down upon us, and I hope it continues that way. I look forward to interacting with you insofar as one can virtually over the days ahead. I will be introducing our second keynote speaker tomorrow and moderating several panels. So many interesting topics, and it's a joy to be back with you again for our 3rd conference. And of course, looking forward to next year when it will hopefully be back here on campus in person and perhaps also in a hybrid form.
Thank you, Dr. Young. May I invite Dr. Barreto to say a few words of welcome?
Greetings, everyone. Welcome to this 3rd PTS World Christianity Conference, the first virtual. We're excited about the opportunity to be in contact with many of you. We, of course, wish we could see you in person and be together on campus, but I think that under the circumstance, that's the best that we can do, and we are very happy with the opportunity to be in connection with you. And also using the opportunity of the virtual conference to reach out to those who have not had a chance to come to our previous on-campus conference. So we will welcome especially those who are connecting with us for the first time, and we wish you a wonderful conference. We have an exciting program. I'm sure that you have seen the program that we have, and I would like to call your attention in particular, and you received instructions about that by email, but if you have not read your email yet, keep in mind that we have a movie screening session on Friday. Here is time is 6 p.m. to 7:30, but you can see when that session will happen to you. And if you are planning to attend that session, I encourage you to do so. Make sure that you access the link that is on the program and that you watch the first 27 minutes of the movie, so we can make the best of that session that will happen on Friday. So I'll see you in several of these sessions. I'll be speaking one of them tonight, and I'll be moderating a couple of them later during this week. I look forward to interacting with as many of you as I can. Welcome.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Barreto. I don't know how the 3 of us appear on your screen. There's a conspiracy theory which is blasphemous. Some people say we are the Trinity. I don't know about that. And we are yet to find out who will represent God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. So we're still thinking about that. But yes, here we are, and we are delighted that actually we are on time, and we've gained some time But let me remind you that at 11:45 Eastern Time, we would have the first keynote address by our very Professor Andrew Walls. Don't miss it. But because we have some time now, we would like to ask you either get a quick coffee or a quick dinner, a quick lunch, and then we resume at 11:45 ET time, not your time. And in the meantime, we would entertain you with some musical interlude and also have tastes from our gallery, pictures from the last two conferences. And so on this note, I would like to again thank Professor Barnes for welcoming and declaring this conference open. I would like to thank Dr. Tom Hastings. I would like to thank all of you who have been part of this opening ceremony. We look forward to seeing you again very soon. Thank you so much, and look forward to the plenary, the keynote speech at 8:55. Thank you. Before I have the pleasure of introducing the keynote speaker for our conference, our first keynote speaker, permit me to share some in-house announcements very quickly. The first point, if you register for this conference, you may have received a recording consent form, which we expect you to complete and return to us. Let me quickly say why we need you to do this. The reason is largely because we are participating virtually in this conference from different parts of the world, which means that at this particular time, some participants are disadvantaged and would not be able to join because it might be 2 a.m. or 4 a.m. But we wanted every participant to have the best opportunity, if not being able to join physically, virtually, but to have access to recorded presentations and even panel sessions. And what we thought was useful is to record all the panels and all the speakers and put all recordings in a password protected space so that members or participants can take advantage of that when the recordings are complete. What we plan to do is to keep all recordings for 2 weeks after the conference, after which all recordings, with the exception of the keynote addresses, will be deleted. So it is for this reason we therefore crave your indulgence to sign and return the forms, the consent form. You are, however, free if you don't want to. We want it to be recorded, say so, and we will respect that. But bear in mind at the same time that if you decline to be recorded, it also means that you will not have access to all other recordings that we have. So thank you for that. The second quick information is regarding your questions and commentary or comments for Professor Andrew Walls. If you look at your screen, you are likely to see the Q&A tab button. We want you to use that space as he presents and towards the end to put in your questions and comments. And then at the end of the keynote speech, we'll be able to retrieve all that questions and make it available to the keynote speaker. So please use the Q&A tab button and not the chat. If you use the chat, we will not get what you are posting. So those were the two in-house announcements, and it's a great pleasure and delight to have and to be able to introduce Professor Andrew F. Walls. And first, we want to show deep appreciation for accepting to give the keynote speech. We recall that we had wanted you to be part of our conference last year. And of course, this was the conference that never took place. So thank you so much for accepting to share your wealth of experience with us today. Before I invite you to the podium to give your talk, I wanted to say a few things about you. If I'm to unpack your CV, that would be a speech in itself. So I have been challenged on how to reduce your encyclopedia CV into a few words. So I will try to do that very briefly. So permit me to do that straight away. Professor Andrew F. Walls is one of the most important interpreters of Christianity and its missionary role in our time. His understanding of the church's transformation from Christendom to world Christianity cuts across disciplines of history, theology, mission studies, and biblical exegesis, and runs deep into the life of the church. Andrew is currently Professor Emeritus of the History of Mission at Liverpool Hope University, Honorary Professor at the University of Edinburgh, Research Professor at Africa International University's Center for World Christianity, and Professor Emeritus at the Akrofi Christaller Institute of Theology, Mission, and Culture. Due to the depression and his father's search for work, Professor Walls was born a Scot in exile in New Milton, England in 1928. He attended Exeter College, Oxford, where he received a bachelor's degree, first class, 1948, a master's degree in 1952, and a B. Lit in 1954. At Oxford, he was a student of both theology and church history and focused his graduate work on patristic studies. In 1951 to 1952, he was a recognized teacher of Hebrew and ecclesiastical history and doctrine, University of Bristol. In 1952, Walls assumed the roles of the secretary and librarian of Tyndale House located in Cambridge, a center of evangelical biblical scholarship associated with the InterVarsity student movement. Between 1957 and 62, he taught at Fura Bay College, University of Sierra Leone. So in 1957, Walls moved to Sierra Leone, where he became a lecturer in theology, which at that time provided both a university education and ministerial training. Between 1962 and 65, Professor Walls taught at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. So in 1962, he became the head of the Department of Religion at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka. He established the first Department of Religion within the Faculty of Social Sciences at that university. Life in Africa is the background for understanding Walls' unique contribution to the church and academy. As a historian of Christianity, Walls made clear that Africa's marginalization was untenable. Practically and conceptually, such a move raised broader questions about the Western-centered church history syllabus. Joined to this was a new learning inquiry, the study of Christianity, religion, and society in Africa into the world around him. Returning to Scotland in 1966, Walls began a teaching post in ecclesiastical history at the University of Aberdeen that would continue till 1985. At Aberdeen, he taught in the Divinity School and later opened a university department of religion. In 1970, he became the first head of Department of Religious Studies at Aberdeen University in Scotland. In 1982, he founded the Center for the Study of Christianity in the non-Western world. So beginning in 1986, Walls and the center found a home at the University of Edinburgh. He became the director from 1986 onwards. The center embodies Walls' commitment to building an intercultural learning community where matters of the global church are explored. Following retirement from Edinburgh, Walls has held a number of distinguished academic posts. From 1997 to 2001, he served as guest professor of ecumenics and mission research here at Princeton Theological Seminary. In 2000, he was the inaugural holder of the Monrad Family Visiting Chair of World Christianity at Harvard University Divinity School. His teaching also continues at the Akrofi Christella Center, Akropong, Ghana, that was directed by Dr. Kwame Bediako of blessed memory. Along the full course of his academic career, Walls founded and edited a number of journals and had leading roles in mission and research societies. For instance, he established the Journal of Religion in Africa in 1967. A wide-ranging commitment to public life and the arts in Scotland was considerably important for Walls, and in 1987 he was awarded the Order of the British Empire. Subsequent to his latest retirement, he has maintained an apparently ceaseless schedule of travel, lecturing, and consultations. The body of work that Walls has developed represents a journey of listening and quest for understanding. It shows us many of the reasons why we live in a moment for the church that is filled with immense opportunity and challenges for witness and mission. Walls is known not only for his pioneering scholarship, but also his generosity of spirit, time, and intellectual energy. One would not remiss not to mention his sense of humor, theatrical gifts, and appreciation for literary works. He has been a true Methodist itinerant, an evangelist who has given his life to the challenge of expounding to a frequently resistant and insular theological constituency. Countless Christians of many traditions and all continents have much cause to be grateful to God for A.F. Walls. If, as a seminarian, you sense the need for an ecclesiology and missiology able to operate with integrity and expectation in the 21st century, then the work of Andrew Walls is an invaluable guide. If you are looking for a model of a committed life of scholarship in service of the church, then Andrew Walls is an exemplar for roads we have yet to travel. He has published, and I would, because of time, just mention three of his publications. In 1996, he published The Missionary Movement in Christian History with Orbis Books. In 2002, he published The Cross-Cultural Process in Christian History, Studies in the Transmission and Appropriation of Faith, also by Orbis. In 2017, he published the Crossing Cultural Frontiers, Studies in the History of World Christianity, also by Orbis. and then co-edited Mission in the 21st Century, Exploring the 5 Marks of Global Mission, together with Kathy Ross. Andrew received the Distinguished Career Award of the American Society of Church History in 2007. And I will not have time to go into all the several awards that he has received globally. He is married to Dr. Ingrid Renner Walls, who is a fellow, very erudite theologian, and who is also here with us virtually. So on behalf of the convener and the conference secretariat, it is my pleasure to invite Professor Andrew F. Walls to take the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Adogame, for your far too generous introduction. To everyone, greetings from Scotland. That it's a high honor to be invited to address such a conference as this goes without saying, and I accept humbly and gratefully. But it's also a delight, and for reasons that are Christian, academic, and personal. It's a delight to see that world Christianity, the great Christian fact of our time, and the great Christian resource of our time, as a topic for investigation and reflection. We all have reason to rejoice in the labors of Professor Young and Professor Adogame and Professor Barreto, of which the series of conferences to which this one belongs play only a small part. For myself, it's a delight to be once more operating, if only virtually, at Princeton Theological Seminary, where a quarter of a century ago, I came to be a guest professor for 1 semester and stayed for 4.5 years. They were rich and happy years, for which I give wholehearted thanks. And I treasure the lasting memory of colleagues, students, staff, and other friends who made them so. And so to our topic, world Christianity and the first world Christianity and its breakup, the great ecumenical failure. And I'm conscious as I speak that both the title and the paper which follow may seem marginal to the central themes of this particular conference on world Christianity. The considerations, I think, lie so close to the heart of world Christianity that they cannot be completely irrelevant. It's now commonly acknowledged that Christianity is global, a 6-continent entity in which Africa, Asia, and Latin America provide the majority of the world's Christians, the proportion growing year on year. There are welcome signs that it's becoming increasingly a field for study and research. But there is an impression that such a Christian world presence is a recent phenomenon, a product of the 20th century. The first 6 or 7 centuries of Christian history. During that time, the Christian presence spread across the greater part of that vast landmass that constitutes Europe, Asia, and Africa. The Christian faith was expressed in a multitude of cultures and civilizations, and in a multitude of languages. It's true that these Christians knew nothing of the Americas or of the South Pacific. And they had no access to a considerable portion of Africa. But they were spread across a huge proportion of the world as they knew the world. Christianity, from its beginning, has been global in principle, and for many centuries was so in practice. The contemporary fact of global Christianity is not a new development, but a return to normality, to the multicentric, multilingual, multicultural early church. The few centuries when Christianity was overwhelmingly a Western religion, its cultural and linguistic expression determined by the peoples of Europe and their descendants elsewhere, are the exception, not the Christian norm. The governing vision of the Church of Christ is that of the book of Revelation. A great multitude reflecting every nation, ethnicity, and language. Multiculturalism is implicit in the New Testament model of the church. When the movement that came to be called Christianity began in the Roman province of Judea, its membership was wholly Jewish. Its major center of growth was Jerusalem. And to judge from the New Testament evidence, the movement made considerable inroads into different cultural and linguistic segments of Jewish society, both Hebraist and Hellenist. And when, as in the affair of provision for widows that's described in Act 6, along cultural lines appeared within the church, the apostolic leadership quickly took steps to diffuse the situation. To call the early Jerusalem church, as we meet it in the early chapters of the Acts of the Apostles, Christian, is, of course, anachronistic. Its members saw themselves as Israel of the Messianic age. They had no idea that they changed their religion to their faith in the Messiah, Jesus. Their religion now was a converted form of what they had before. It was Jewish life lived in the light of the Messiahship of Jesus, an actualization of the prophet's words about a people with the law of God written in their hearts. They vigorously proclaimed the gospel of the Messiahship of Jesus to homeland Jews and to diaspora Jews. But they seem to have been in no hurry to go into all the world and make disciples of all nations. The New Testament records a series of incidents. Peter and Cornelius, Philip in Samaria, the Ethiopian eunuch, which force this issue of the nations on the church's thinking and prepare the reader for the mission of Paul. The breakthrough is described in Acts 11, centered in Antioch, when a group of refugees from Jerusalem spoke about Jesus to Greek-speaking pagans using the title Lord, which had resonances both in Jewish tradition and Hellenistic pagan religion, in preference to the Messiah concept as the focus for presenting Jesus. The outcome was a bicultural Jesus-worshipping community in Antioch, which now needed a name. Adopted, or was given, the name Christian. So to be Christian is implicitly to belong to a community that is not monocultural. Antioch developed as a mission center, and other ethnically mixed churches arose across Anatolia as a result. The essentially bicultural nature of the church from this point on was recognized by its apostolic leadership, themselves all observant Jews, and it's reflected in the apostolic council described in Acts 15. There had been a movement in some quarters to treat Gentile followers of Jesus as proselytes to Judaism, requiring them to receive circumcision and keep the Torah. Once the principle was established that neither circumcision nor Torah was a requirement for Gentile Christians, and Paul indeed goes further, insisting in Galatians that it's not even an option for Gentile Christians, then the principle of biculturalism was formally enshrined in the Christian community, since Jewish believers, correctly according to Paul, continued to be subject to both law and circumcision. Just as the Jerusalem church embodied a form of converted Judaism, so the decision of the Apostolic Council implicitly required that the religion of Gentile Christians represent a converted form of Hellenistic culture. Hellenistic life lived in the light of Jesus the Lord. We see this Hellenistic way of Christian living in process of construction in the epistles of Paul. And the epistle to the Ephesians shows us two different segments of social reality converted. The converted social reality, converted Judaism and converted Hellenistic culture, equally necessary as building blocks for the new temple of the Spirit, then in process of construction. A temple in which Jew and Gentile would worship together. In the economy of God, converted Judaism and converted Christ-directed Hellenistic society were necessary to each other. Jerusalem remained the respected mother church of all. The Gentile mission continued, and as the Hellenistic Gentile element within it increased and became dominant. When famine and distress struck Jerusalem, the overwhelmingly Gentile churches displayed solidarity with their Jewish fellow believers with generous donations. But the Jewish War of AD 66 to 70 all but destroyed the social basis of converted Judaism. Increasing Jewish hostility to the Christian way, reducing number of Jews who accepted Jesus as Messiah, and the sheer success of the Gentile mission in the Hellenistic world caused the original bicultural model of the church to give way to a Christian lifestyle that reflected a converted form of Greco-Roman culture, drawing heavily on Greco-Roman vocabulary and thought processes. This eclipse of the original bicultural model of the church, however, was the prelude to the development of a new multicultural model. For from this period, the Christian faith spread in three general directions: westwards across the Roman Empire, including the lands on all the shores of the Mediterranean; eastwards, with Christians to the fore, into the Persian Empire and beyond it, across Asia; and southwards, both by way of the Nile Valley and the Horn of Africa to the African interior, East African interior, and by way of the Red Sea and South Arabia to South India. Over a period of some 6 centuries, a remarkable expansion of the Christian faith took place in all three directions. In the westward expansion, the Roman Empire first accommodated Christianity and then adopted it. A socially bottom-upwards movement, with the old Roman aristocracy the last to yield. Christians took over and developed the Greek cultural institution of the philosophical school. The resultant prolonged interaction between Christianity and the Greek philosophical, intellectual, and literary traditions had a surprising outcome. At one time, Christianity and Greek intellectual culture had been held to be incompatible. But not only did Christian thinking and writing wither the Greek intellectual attack, Greek philosophy, later Roman legal theory, were put into Christian service with lasting results for Christian theology and for the emergence of the creeds and other formularies. At first, the Roman state saw Christianity as potentially disruptive, an assessment given support by Christian refusal to participate in ritual acts of civil religion involving sacrifice to the imperial Genius. The state-instituted persecution was at first sporadic and local, designed to control expansion. Later persecution became centralized and systematic, aimed at destroying the Christian leadership and organization. Finally, by the reign of Diocletian, came an all-out attack on Christians and everything they stood for. Through all, despite numbers of Christians lapsing under persecution, the popular movement toward Christianity continued, with wide recognition of its moral and social benefits. There's no single date for the fall of Roman paganism. Local communities took it into their own hands. The issue of overthrowing the altars when they felt they were strong enough to do so. Greek-speaking East and Latin-speaking West united in Christian profession. Egypt, Asia Minor, North Africa developed as leading centers of Christian life and thought. The spread of Christianity within the empire was not always matched by evangelistic activity beyond it, though there were notable successes, such as those associated with the Goth Wulfila, whose ancestors were Christian prisoners from Pontus seized by Gothic raiders, who Wulfila led a major movement of the Goths towards the Christian faith, with the scriptures translated into the Gothic language. Or the parallel case of Patrick, a Celtic captive from Romanized Britain, taken prisoner to Ireland, who became a powerful evangelist there. Christian impact on the North African desert and mountain peoples seems, however, to have been small. The political reality was that Rome, under Christian or pre-Christian rule, had difficulty in maintaining the empire's far extended frontiers against the peoples to the north and south, and against the superpower Persia to the east. The eventual collapse of those frontiers in the west was to lead to a massive movement towards Christianity of the peoples beyond the frontiers of the empire, those whom the Romans called barbarians. Thinking of the narrative in the Acts of the Apostles again, This reflects an early stage of the westward movement we've been describing. But at one point, Luke takes the account in a southward direction with his story of the Ethiopian eunuch, who's last seen rejoicing on his way back into the heart of Africa as a baptized believer in Jesus. A significant part of the story of the movement of the gospel into the heart of Africa, which the account in Luke 8 opens, relates to Egypt. We must remember a pre-Arab Egypt, in which the dark-skinned Cushite peoples were well known. Egypt lay within the Roman Empire, and Alexandria, its bustling metropolis, and other major towns were very much part of the Greek world. But the rural areas reflected a different cultural milieu, and Coptic, the vernacular speech derived from ancient Egyptian, stubbornly held on. In this Coptic-speaking rural area, Christianity spread early and widely. The Bible in the Sahidic dialect of Coptic is one of the oldest Bible translations of all. Antony, born in or about 251, shows us an African villager who served as an archetype of the African Christianity of a much later time. He represents a movement of Christian religious revival. It's radical, biblicist, spiritually confrontational. It's marked by a sharp sense of the reality of the spirit world, of the activity of evil powers, of the necessity for spiritual combat, of the completeness of Christ's victory in such combat. Coptic Christianity produced a core of devoted, radical, charismatic Christians. And in the monastic movement that developed there, it found a way of organizing the core as a disciplined directive force. In Aksum, in the Horn of Africa, a church began in the early 4th century. The inscriptions of the Aksumite king Ezana V, in our own time uncovered by Israeli archaeologists, reflect how during his reign a national religious movement took place, where polytheism was replaced by monotheism and then by open Christian allegiance. Rufinus associates this change in Aksum with the work of two Christian brothers, one of whom he knew, who were shipwrecked on the Eritrean coast and pressed into royal service. It's this incident that opened the long and still continuing history of Ethiopian Christianity. Up the Nile, south of Egypt, in what we now think of as the Sudan Republic, lay several African states collectively called by the Romans Nubia. A Greek Christian historian relates how in the year 543, the Emperor Justinian and his wife Theodora sent to the three Nubian states embassies that issued in their conversion to Christianity. Archaeology in our own time has revealed a dimension that is missing in Theodora's story. It's clear from the archaeological record that Christianity had already been present in Nubia for at least 150 years when these embassies from the imperial center were sent. The Roman embassies mark not the first coming of the gospel to the Nubian states, as we long thought, but the acceptance by the rulers of those states of what had already been adopted by many of their people. By AD 600, there was a significant and still expanding Christian presence in Eastern Africa, centered on the Nile Valley and the Ethiopian plateau. Meanwhile, the Christian message was increasingly embraced among Syriac-speaking peoples on both sides of the shifting border between the Roman and Persian empires. Edessa, a whole principality that served as a sort of buffer state between the Roman and Persian empires and was eventually incorporated into the Roman, was a particularly important Christian center. Christianity spread throughout Mesopotamia until most of the population of what is now Iraq professed the Christian faith, producing a vigorous church, which in the succeeding centuries provided intellectual leadership for centers of Eastern Christianity and produced a large body of missionaries. A poem written early in the 3rd century celebrates Christian communities in the provinces of Iran and also among the desert Arabs, and describes the social and cultural practices that it claims have been transformed by their conversion. The Christian impact on Iran was increased by mass deportations into Iran of Christians from Syria later in the third century to work on the massive building projects then in process. By the 4th century, Merv, which is in what is now the borderland of Iran and Afghanistan, was then accounted a major Christian center. Though so strong in Mesopotamia, Christianity never had the runaway effect in the Persian Empire that it did in the Roman. And significantly, there was never a Persian Constantine. But there were many, many martyrs. The Persian Empire, especially in the 4th century, saw martyrdoms in response to an ill-judged appeal by Constantine on behalf of Iranian Christians. But it's clear that Christians were to be found in Iranian priestly and royal families. And when the last Zoroastrian emperor died, fleeing from the Arab Muslim army, it was Christian monks who buried him. Christian interaction with Iranian culture also, of course, produced a major new religion in Manichaeism. By the end of the 5th century, then, Christianity was expanding well beyond the Persian Empire. In 549, the Bactrian Huns declared themselves a Christian people. Their church had been founded by Arab Christians sold to them as slaves. In the same period, the Hittite kingdom became Christian in the ancient Yemen. Christian expansion in Asia was brought about by 3 principal groups of agents. The devotional disciplines of the Syriac Church were designed to produce spiritual athletes who'd be in a real sense temples of the Holy Spirit. And these included missionaries ready to endure extreme conditions. Second, Christian families traveled for trade, moving huge distances from home and forming congregations there. And the third major influence came from refugees from persecution or harassment elsewhere. That influence particularly notable in India. The trade routes by land and sea drew both the settled trading families and the missionaries. The sea route to India, fed by the monsoon, may have drawn one of the earliest missionaries of all. Persistent and multiform tradition, Hindu as well as Christian, associates the Apostle Thomas with India, as do the oldest Christian communities there still, and identifies the site at Mylapore near Chennai with his death. The early 3rd century book, The Acts of Judas Thomas, is a novel, not a historical treatise, but it was clearly written by someone with real knowledge of India. The possibility of Jewish communities in India may well have drawn the apostle there in the earliest times. What is certain, from very early centuries, there has been a significant worshipping Christian community in South India. It met the first Christians to arrive from the West in the 16th century. It remains to this day. Excuse me. Thank you. Syriac sources refer to the existence of churches in Sri Lanka, and there is the issue of whether there were any beyond, where the trade winds opened the way towards Southeast Asia. The main landward route was, of course, the Silk Road to China across Central Asia. And here there's abundant evidence of both the traders and the missionaries. In the 6th century, a Turkic king was converted, and thereafter a Christian presence developed among the Turkic peoples surrounding the Christian empire, with translations into Mongol and Manchu of the Christian scriptures. Samarkand on the Silk Road became a center of church activity. To the north, the nomadic peoples had an organized church, their bishop traveling round with them, his cathedral a tent. In 65, a Syriac Arab Christian mission reached the court of the Emperor of China and was politely received, perhaps because China, now a rising power, was beginning to take interest in the affairs of its neighbors. The emperor's expressed desire to study the Christian scriptures and their teaching took these Christians into a new world of thought and expression. The process of translation and imperial study of the translation took 3 years, after which the emperor announced his approval of Christian teaching and gave permission for its propagation. The terms of the edict announcing this suggest that Christian teaching appeared to him to be in accord with Confucian moral and social values. An inscription erected in 781 gives an account of the first 150 years of Chinese Christianity, indicating periods of favor and periods of disfavor. Its history thereafter is problematical, and the ultimate fate of the luminous religion, as it's called in the inscription, brought first by Arab missionaries to China from in the 7th century, remains mysterious. Changing conditions, making new discoveries possible, may provide more light on this. But there's tantalizing evidence for the interaction between Arab Christian missionaries and Buddhist missionaries from India. The 20th century Norwegian scholar missionary Karl Ludwig Reichelt argued that contact with early Christianity had moved Chinese Buddhism in a new direction, opening it to the need of a savior and producing within it a doctrine of grace. A recurrent feature of Christian history in China has been the problem of religious vocabulary and how both Confucian and Buddhist sources can be drawn on for the purpose. This missiological crux was already present in the 7th century. By that time, Christianity, always in principle global, had become so in practice. It had spread over a considerable part of the then known world and was still expanding. It straddled the Eurasian landmass from the Atlantic almost to the Pacific. I believe it's fair to designate this world Christianity, something analogous to the cross-continental phenomenon that we know today. Christianity was even then beginning to make an impression on the barbarian tribes of North and West Europe. About the time that the Emperor of China was looking at the Christian scriptures, the King of Northumbria, in what is now England, was hearing the proclamation of the gospel for the first time and calling a council of elders to decide what to do about it. Then, as now, much of the world lay outside world Christianity. In the Roman Empire, mission activity, the fear of the barbarians and the possible collapse of the frontiers inhibited much mission activity beyond those frontiers. The tenuousness of the Christian presence among the desert peoples of North Africa has already been mentioned. This inhibited the spread to sub-Saharan Africa. And though Arab Christianity was strong in the populated Arab, in the most populated Arab locations, it had little hold on the tribes of the interior of Arabia. Christian expansion has never been a matter of uninterrupted, steady progress or resistless advance. And between the 5th and the 7th centuries, a series of developments helped to turn back the tide of advance and inflict serious loss on the Christian Church. The first was the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. There's no single datable event for deciding this. Augustine, who died in 430, saw its early manifestations, the barbarian sacking of Rome and the Vandal invasion of North Africa. Thereafter, despite periods of recovery, the story is of falling frontiers, invading peoples from the north, establishment of barbarian kingdoms, usually initially pagan, in what had been Roman Christian areas. In some of these, notably North Africa, the church declined, ceased to matter. In others, endemic war brought weakness. Constantine, realizing that the empire's center of gravity lay in the east now, had long before moved his capital to the new Rome on the Bosphorus, Constantinople. Thus, the Christian Roman Empire, now Greek-speaking, continued to exist for some time. The Greek Church has no Middle Ages. The patristic period extends to the 15th century. But inevitably, events in the western part of the empire meant that Western and Eastern Christians would in future follow different paths. We saw that the New Testament model of the church was bicultural. By the 2nd century, that model had almost disappeared, succeeded by a multicultural, multicentric church. For despite the doctrinal divisions, and in particular the Arian controversy, Christians East, West, and South continued to recognize one another as belonging to a single great church. The Greek word oikoumene stands for the inhabited world. And it's fair to designate the Christianity that we have been describing as, in this sense, ecumenical. But from a Roman point of view, the world was often the Roman world. And so oikoumene came to be used for the Roman Empire, as it does in Luke chapter 2, verse 1. So in the days of the Christian Empire, it became easy to think of the church less as a worldwide institution than an empire-wide one. Just as pagan emperors had persecuted Christians in the interest of imperial unity, Christian emperors found that religious or theological disharmony was potentially destructive of the empire. Constantine began the process when, in 325, he sought to end the Arian controversy through a council of the whole church held at Nicaea. But he did at least recognize that the church extended beyond the empire, and at Nicaea, a small number of bishops from other parts of the world were present. Later emperors saw no such necessity. The Council of Chalcedon, for instance, called in 451 to settle matters of Christology for the peace of the Roman Empire, had no one from beyond the imperial frontiers. In fact, Chalcedon produced a framework which satisfied most of those who did their theological thinking in Latin and those who did their theological thinking in Greek. But it did not satisfy those who thought in Coptic or Syriac. Large numbers of Syriac and Coptic Christians were alienated as a result. The situation became far worse in the following century as successive imperial governments sought to impose the Chalcedonian formula by force. The bitter fruit was seen at the time of the Muslim conquest. Egyptian and many Syriac Christians welcomed the Arab armies as liberators from the oppression of their Christian rulers, and relished the toleration that Muslims extended to their Christological formulations. In effect, the 6th century saw the great multicultural church divided along lines of language and culture. The ecumenical tragedy of that century has been hidden by concentration on the Greek-Latin doctrinal debate on Christology. Names such as Nestorian and Monophysite became theological swear words, though all parties believed that full divinity and full humanity were perfectly united in the incarnate Christ. The majority of Syriac-speaking Christians and the majority of Coptic speakers in Egypt, and almost all other African Christians in Ethiopia and Nubia, followed the confessions that imperial Christianity had anathematized. In other words, the rupture of the church took place along linguistic and cultural lines. The division has been permanent and there were two long-term effects. One was that the Christians of Europe became cut off from the Christians of Asia and Africa. Second, further divisions of the church along linguistic and cultural lines became easier and easier, until by our own times they could be taken for granted. The New Testament norm of the multicultural church passed from view. The great ecumenical failure of the 6th and 7th centuries marks the breakup of the original world Christianity. Events that followed brought the rise of Islam, and with it the Arab Empire, in which extended its rule over both Monophysite Christians in Egypt and the Nestorian and Monophysite Christians in Syria. The emergence of the Mongols and their eventual decision for Islam heralded the eclipse of early Asian Christianity. All did not disappear, especially in the older Christian lands, and in Ethiopia, the Christian community substantially expanded. But the former sense of a Christian oikoumene was shattered. African and Asian Christians were cut off from Christians in Europe, where the newly dominant form of Christianity arose and became acculturated over centuries to European thought, languages, and conditions. Europeans came to assume that theirs was not, it was, if not the only form of Christianity, at least the only authentic one. And Europeans even spoke of their continent as Christendom, Christianity on the map, the Christian part of the world, looking southwards and eastwards to its mirror image in Dar al-Islam. The legacy of the collapse in the 6th century of the first expressions of global Christianity were to prove burdensome in the 16th century. We're now in a new age of world Christianity, an even larger, more diverse than the earlier model, but like it, multicentric, multilingual, multicultural. It operates under conditions that permit a new start. Perhaps the acid test for Christianity in the 21st century will be whether the 6th century legacy can be repaired, and whether African and Indian and Chinese and Japanese and Korean and North and South American and East and West European Christianity can each present a convincing segment of Christian social reality, each forming a building block for the new temple of the Holy Spirit, sharing and cohering together the body of Christ. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Walls. I should have forewarned you that Professor Walls is an encyclopedia of world Christianity. And what you've just heard, I would tell you, is a tip on the iceberg. Is actually a kind of a warm-up. So we do appreciate that. And that gives us some time for Q&A. And just as we indicated, if you have any questions or any comments, put that on the Q&A link, and then we would recognize you immediately. So Professor Walls, yes, has graciously accepted to take some questions. And the first one is from Kirk Sandvik. And the question goes, as you mentioned, Christianity has always had an element of globalism, and as it spread through and brought new Christian flavors. How have non-Christian perceptions of Christianity changed as it shifted from local, global, empirical, and worldly lenses?
I'm sorry, could I ask for repetition there? There was a little distortion on the line. I didn't catch the second half.
All right, so let me repeat, Prof. As you mentioned, Christianity has always had an element of globalism, and as it spread through and brought new Christian flavors. How have non-Christian perceptions of Christianity changed as it shifted from local, global, empirical, and worldly lenses? Did you get that?
Yes, this is an enormously wide question, and I suspect it's one of those which requires a multiple participation with the people, with many people contributing to it. I certainly find it hard to make any generalizations there, but perhaps the questioner himself would have some something to take this further.
Thank you, Professor Walls. So we're waiting for any more questions or comments.
Oh dear.
Yeah, I guess you are bamboozled by, that breadth of Christian history.
I'm sorry to have destroyed it.
No, not at all. Yes. So anyone else from the audience? Okay, good. There's some persuasion there. So the next question is, why, this is from Arun Jones. What are the earliest indications we have of Greek and Syriac Christianity? I repeat, what are the earliest indications we have of Greek and Syriac Christianity? Professor Walls.
The earliest indications. Well, it still seems to me that the starting point has to be within the New Testament itself, where we see this what is what begins. Jerusalem is so obviously the center of that earliest community, and these are, after all, the people who have been with the master all this time. What were they making of the situation that you've got by the end of the Acts of the Apostles, with this mixed multitude coming up across the East Mediterranean, where, as I say, I think the Greek Christianity, if we're using Greek in the sense of Greek-speaking people in the Mediterranean area, sharing in the very mixed Hellenistic culture and nothing belonging to many different parts of the East Mediterranean world. To be Greek doesn't have much to do with Greece as a country, or where you're born, or what your ethnicity is. It's essentially a cultural term. And it seems to me that the New Testament epistles show us this sort of Greek Christianity being developed. Something must have been happening similarly in the Syriac-speaking Arab communities. We know much less about the early stages there, but the one factor that we have to think of in the Syriac communities is the Jewish the presence of strong Jewish communities, which seem to have had a substantial effect on the way that Syriac Christianity developed. That didn't happen in the Greek world, where the Jews were this awkward minority that didn't really fit in, that wouldn't eat with you, and so on. The way that Syriac that Syriac devotional groups work, this idea of a youth movement, young people who feel are seeking the call, seeking to be radically Christian. It's the spirit that produces the missionaries who can walk hundreds of miles across Central Asia in extreme conditions. This is one of the things, it seems to me, that we learn about the early Syriac Christianity, that seems to move in these Arab circles. Of course, it can produce excess. We probably we feel sympathy rather than admiration for St. Simeon Stylites now, but this is Arab Christianity within this period, and it is certainly radical. These are people who are going all out, seeking complete consecration to be, in the fullest possible sense of the word, the temple of the Holy Spirit. Those are first conclusions that come to me.
Yes, Thank you, Professor Waltz. I think the questions are now warming up. I've got the next one for you. It says from Eastern Law, what can these lessons from the failure of the first world Christianity that you have shared reframe contemporary endeavors in the current ecumenical movement? And I think Jim Alt sort of rephrased that. Could you push that up a bit? All right, so James Ott casted that differently, so maybe it will be two questions in one. Ruth, can you? Yeah, okay, sorry. So Jim is asking differently, given lessons of history, what are the key challenges to building and sustaining the unity of the church in our 21st century? I think those two questions are.
Thank you. Yes, I got lost. Yes. I think this is obviously a very important issue that I think we probably all got to think about, and it becomes urgent for the future. Let me just think in terms, perhaps I can be anecdotal for a time and just thinking of how this looks from an academic point of view. As Professor Adogame said in his very kind introduction, there was a period when it seemed to me the academic challenge was to produce a study, was to produce facilities for the study of Christianity in the non-Western world. The Edinburgh Centre, which started under that name, is now very properly called the Centre for the Study of World Christianity. But the real point was that the study of that in fact, I'm terribly sorry. Let me start again with it from another anecdotal point of view. The theology that I first studied never got beyond the 5th century. And we never got out. I don't think we ever considered any part of the world other than the Mediterranean and the Middle East. Coming later on, yes, after, I have to say, a period in Africa, realizing that after a decade away, I had come back to, by moving from West Africa back to Britain, I was moving from a more Christian to a less Christian community. And yet our theology is still based on this assumption of continuing an essentially European intellectual legacy. And the reason for starting the center was, yes, let us look at the rest of the Christian world, provide facilities for study of that, I have to say that there was more interest from the non-theological world. It was the social scientists, the sociologists, the political scientists, and so on, who were interested in what we were doing. Very little impression, as far as one could see, with the traditional theologians. My fear about the study of world Christianity in Western settings is that it becomes a niche, a thing that you look at if you're interested in that sort of thing, and not that you're actually looking at the reality of the Christian church. So that's just the academic side of it. The thing that worries me about our present church consciousness, and I come into this only from its margins, but while, as with the academics, yes, there's a great delight that you're studying world Christianity and that we have facilities for world Christianity. And yes, we're so delighted to meet Christians from Africa and Asia and Latin America and so on. But little sense of the world reality and of where the church is. And thinking of the great ecumenical failure, I still feel we could have another ecumenical failure where we do not take seriously this movement at the center of the gravity, of the church to other parts of the world, and that in fact we'll be left just doing what we did before. So I think the things which this conference is representing are absolutely vital for the health, certainly for the health of academic theology, but for the health of the churches. And my fear is that Western churches will just not take seriously their place within the larger world. I'm thinking of churches in my country, my own included, that have been discussing issues of sexuality and so on in an entirely Western setting, and without the conciliar approach which at least the early church tried to bring about. So yes, I think I think we're in a crucial time for making world Christianity a reality, institutionally, academically, and in terms of our own thinking at every point.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Walls, for getting provocative. And we are 6 minutes beyond time. And may I use my prerogative as the chair just now to suggest that we will collate the list of questions. There are several that are lined up, and then get them across to you for your responses. And then we can cascade that back to the questionnaires. But let me use this opportunity to ask you to choose between these two questions, and you can answer it with by sentence. So the first question is, any recommendations, Professor Wall, action steps to repair the 6th century breach in the academy, church globally? So that's the first question. The second is the diversification of Christianity that occurred in the 6th and 7th century and event that you have described as an ecumenical failure really either a failure or a division, or might it not be better be described as part of Christianity's creative? So choose which question you like and just sum it up.
Could I just ask about the second question? What is the last word? I didn't quite catch.
Creative. I can read it. Yes, a question from Douglas Jacobson. It says, is the diversification of Christianity that occurred in the 6th and 7th century an event that you have described as an ecumenical failure really either a failure or a division, or might it not better be described as part of Christianity's creative?
I see. Since we're at this point, it still seems to me something tragic happened that is the reason why I speak of this as the great ecumenical failure. What happened was that he split 3 ways along linguistic and cultural lines. Now, that later became a habit. Come the 11th century, and Greek and Latin Christians, Eastern and Western Christians, divide along linguistic and cultural lines. Come later events, and we get to a situation in the 20th century where if you don't like the church, you can go and start your own. Think of these models in relation to what's happening in Antioch in Acts 11, where these people from a Greek pagan background, Greek speaking, they're Syrian, huge mass of different religious influences behind them. But they fit in with the generic sort of East Mediterranean religion. And they come up against this reality. Yes, they've known Jews and perhaps admired Jews for their morality and been interested in this monotheistic idea, but they couldn't take all the business about washing and eating and so on. What a new world this opens. The New Testament world, the world of the epistles, and it's an exciting remaking of society. It's returning to that sort of those are that's the creative aspect that I would see. I don't. And therefore, it does seem to me a failure. The conditions that cause the drifting apart of African, Asian, and European Christians preceded the real spread of the Islamic Empire. It preceded the great Mongol invasion. All these things were to happen in future, and Christians just got cut off from each other. And so when they do in the 16th century meet up again, when with the great journeys of the 16th century, European Christians are reaching India, and well, this looks like a church service. This looks like the Mass, but what's happening? And they can't be Christians. When they get to Ethiopia, this can't be right. The Mass in Ethiopic, it's got to be in Latin. That sort of division that would be unthinkable in the earlier period when you were living in the same world. I think this is still important. So it is a division, yes, but I think it's a failure that produces the division. We've got to do the best from the divisions that result from it, the best we can. But it's a failure. And I think we need to build against the prospect of other failures that divide Christians continentally, ethnically, or any other way.
Thank you, Professor Walls. Don't get him started, because his vastness, he has the history of Christianity in his palm. And we have up to 10 questions that are unanswered. So, but I'm afraid that we cannot continue and take those on. We would convey them directly to Professor Walls. This session would need to end now. But before we end, let me remind you that paper session 1 would be between 6 and 7:30 p.m. Later this evening, ET time, not your time. And paper session 2 will be from 7:45 to 9:15. It might be morning or afternoon or evening where you are. So please take note of the time, the geographical zone that you belong. And we would look forward to seeing you later from my time this evening. But be reminded that there's a panel, the special panel to honor Professor Walls is tomorrow, and we would want to encourage you to be part of that as well. Having said that, I would like to ask you to join me, whether we can see you virtually or not, to give a big round of applause to who I will call always our living ancestor of world Christianity, for a job well done. So thank you, Professor Walls.
So much for this huge
So at this juncture, we would like to close this session, and we look forward to seeing you again later this afternoon. Thank you.